The Secret of the Indian by Lynne Reid Chapter 11, Ruby Lou. The feet moved on, across the sidewalk, not along it. This ride was quite pleasantly unexciting after the other. Patrick heard a thud as the lady boldly pushed open some swinging doors. Then she walked inside. The street sounds, the clopping of hooves, the thudding of feet, the sound of wagons, the voices and barking dogs changed to other sounds familiar to Patrick from Western films. He knew at once he was in a saloon. There was a piano playing a jangly tune, and lots of voices shouting and singing cheerfully. The smell in the air was of alcohol, cigarette smoke, cheap scent, sweat, sawdust, and leather. The lady, who was unwittingly carrying Patrick, made straight for the bar. She rested on a rail the foot he was on. It was dark down there, and the smell was pretty bad. Patrick wondered how he could attract the lady's attention, or whether it would be fatal to do so. He could hear her voice among the others. "And who's going to buy me a drink, boys? Ruby Lou don't take kindly to drinking alone, and she never pays for her own liquor." There was no shortage of offers. Patrick saw men's feet crowding around the red shiny boots and heard the jovial cries of male voices above yelling, "Yeah, Lou, I'll buy you a dozen. Good old Ruby Lou, have one on me, sweetheart." Okay, don't crowd me now," Ruby Lou said sharply, and the boots shuffled reluctantly a step backwards. Patrick could hear the noisy glug-glug-glugging of whiskey being poured from a bottle, and he could smell it too. Whiskey made him think at once of Boone, and so it seemed quite an incredible coincidence when Ruby Lou's voice suddenly echoed his thoughts. "Hey, where's my favorite fella?" she cried. "Where's Boone? Boone always makes me laugh." "Boo-hoo, Boone! Make you cry more like," jeered one man, and the rest all burst out into mock boo-hooing. Ruby Lou took offense on Boone's behalf. "Ain't nothing wrong with a soft heart," she said. "Trouble with you boys is you ain't got hearts. Or if you have, they ain't got no more feeling in 'em than chunks of rock. It don't mean he ain't got no guts, neither. Gimme a man with feelin', even if he do get through 2 or 3 of my best laced-edge hankies every time we hear a hard-luck story." She shouldn't have said that. The notion of Boone mopping his tears with lace hankies was too much even for Patrick. As the crowd of men above him burst their sides laughing, Patrick below on the red leather laughed too until, weakened as he was, he slipped. He felt himself slipping down the side of the boot and grabbed the red bootlace. This broke his fall, but it gave Ruby Lou's foot a tug. As he climbed backwards up to his perch, he saw her huge hand coming down toward him. He crouched low in the opening of her boot. He didn't realize that he was digging his hands and feet into the instep until he heard her say peevishly, "I got me an itch on my tootsie. This saloon is turning into a real flea circus." Her fingers with their sharp nails began to prod around the lacings. Patrick tried to dodge, but suddenly one finger fell on him, squeezing him hard against the metal-rimmed lace hole, so that he thought his back would break, and he writhed frantically to free himself. "Hey, this is some flea that's biting me," she squealed. She picked Patrick up between finger and thumb, and the next second he was being swung through the air. Ruby Lou set Patrick down on the bar. All at once, the noise in his immediate vicinity stopped. The sudden, startled silence spread backwards until even the piano player faltered and faded out. Patrick stood ankle-deep in a puddle of whiskey. The fumes nearly knocked him out, looking upward fearfully at the semicircle of enormous faces around him, waiting helplessly for one or another of them to raise a meaty hand and swat him flat. No one did. Instead, the bartender, who was standing on the other side of the bar with a bottle of whiskey in his hand, dropped it and fell on the bar with a, to Patrick, ear-numbing clunk, making the whole bar jump, and to his horror began rolling slowly toward him, spilling whiskey as it went. Seeing it approach, Patrick raced to get out of its way. He ran as fast as his aching legs would let him, hearing the huge bottle trundling along the wooden bar behind him. Nearer and nearer. Surely it must roll over him like a steamroller, but luckily for him it didn't roll straight. Abruptly he heard the noise stop as it reached the edge. There was a brief pause before it shattered on the barroom floor. He stopped running and turned, panting. The eyes of every person in the saloon were fixed on him, and every bloodshot eye was popping. Vast mouths hung loosely open. Bristly faces were paper white or mottled purple. What is that?" gibbered one man at last, pointing at him with a trembling finger. "Boys, am I seeing things, or is that a little tiny, actual fella. Before anyone could reply, Patrick sensed a quick movement behind him. He spun around instinctively to find himself staring straight at the barrel of a six-shooter. "Whatever it is, I don't like it," growled the owner, and fired. The noise alone nearly killed Patrick, though the gun wavered at the last second. Did a red, shiny bulk lurch against the shooting arm? The bullet plowed into the top of the bar right next to him, splintering the wood. The next moment, complete chaos broke out. The barman, who had reared back against the enormous mirror which reflected the whole room, suddenly and silently sank out of sight behind the bar. This seemed to act as a signal. The giants at the bar went crazy, bumping into each other, throwing punches, firing their guns at random in a series of horrific explosions. One of the light fixtures was hit and came crashing down, causing total panic. There was a concerned mass movement backwards, away from the bar, followed by a rising thunder of boots stampeding on boards, causing massive vibrations that had Patrick involuntarily dancing up and down on the bar. 20 or 30 men cut aparting through the smoky air as they forced their way out through the narrow doorway. One little fellow, a piano player, tripped, fell, and was ruthlessly trampled underfoot by the rest. When they'd all gone, he lay there for a moment, winded, before picking himself up. He gave one terrified backward look toward the bar, cast his eyes upward as if in prayer, let out a weird sound, and fled, clutching his hat. The swinging doors went whump, 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 backwards and forwards on emptiness, before coming to a stop. Patrick gingerly took his fingers out of his ears and glanced around the saloon, expecting to find himself alone. But he wasn't, not quite. Standing a few yards down the bar, the exact distance that Patrick had run away from the bottle, was a giantess with blonde hair and a rather low-cut satin dress. It was hard for Patrick to judge, but she looked quite pretty. She wore a sparkling necklace of red stones and dangly earrings, and a very funny expression as she looked at him. She reached out suddenly and picked up her small glass, which she emptied down her throat in one gulp. Then she plonked it back on the bar and said, "Well, little fella, you sure would make a good temperance preacher. I ain't never seen a saloon empty so fast. Thanks for letting them buy me a drink first. I needed it." She laughed a little crazily and drank someone else's drink that had been abandoned. Then she beckoned to him. "Come here, little Jack the Giant Killer. Come to Ruby Lou. Come on, I won't hurt you. I just want to make sure you ain't something I dreamt." Patrick walked back along the vast shiny expanse of the bar toward her. His legs were shaking and his feet squelched in his whiskey-sodden sneakers. He had no idea whether he would be safe with her or not, but he couldn't manage alone. Who else was there? Anyway, she liked Moon, so she couldn't be all bad. Ruby Lou's face, brightly painted, came down until it was level with his. He could smell her perfume. Well, it was better than the whiskey, anyway. "Okay, kid, let's have it. What gives? I ain't drunk and I ain't crazy, and you look to me like the smallest human critter that ever was in the length and breadth of Texas." "Actually, I'm English," said Patrick, feeling silly but not knowing what else to say. "English? Is that supposed to be an introduction or an explanation? I heard it was kind of a small island, but I never knew the men from there were only 3 inches tall." Patrick blinked. "I'm not exactly a typical English person," he said. "You see—" "Speak up, kid. That's a teeny tiny voice box you got there, and I'll admit it to you. I'm a mite deaf from all the shooting and shouting that goes on around here." Patrick cleared his throat. "Sorry," he bellowed. Then he shouted, "Listen, I need help." "You could have fooled me, Buster." "Not just for myself, for Boone." "Say," her face lit up. "You a friend of Billy Boone's?" "Yes, we're old friends, and he's in trouble." "Yeah, tell me something new. When ain't he?" "He's lying out in the desert unconscious. I think someone should go out there and get him." "Can you show me where he is?" "No, but maybe his horse can. It's outside, or it was." Ruby Lou straightened up and looked around. The saloon was empty, but peeping over the top of the swinging door was a pair of eyes under a well-pulled-down hat. "Hey, Reverend, come in here. It's okay." The doors slowly parted, and the little piano player who had been trampled on sidled hesitantly in. "I want you to meet my new sidekick, Pat," said Patrick, thinking Patrick sounded a bit of a feeble name for the Wild West. "Pat, This is Tickle. His real name's Reverend Godfrey Tixon, and he has a past you wouldn't believe to look at him now, but we call him Tickle 'cause he tickles the ivories. Plays the piano, get it? Plays real good, too, especially hymns. Only not now, eh, Tick? I got something important for you to do. Is your buggy handy? Yeah, Ruby, said the Reverend Tickle in a squeaky voice. It's right outside. Me and Pat here is going for a little ride on Boone's hoss, and you're going to drive right along behind us. What do you say? She patted his chubby cheek. Sure, Ruby, squeaked Tickle, nearly nodding his hat off. If you say so. Ruby Lou's white hand with its glittering ring swept Patrick up. Gasping, he felt for the first time how the little people had felt when he and Omri had handled them. He hoped he'd always picked up Boone as gently as Ruby Lou did him, but he doubted it, remembering some times when he'd stuffed him in his jeans pocket and not been at all bothered if the cowboy was frightened or uncomfortable. Where do you favor riding, pal? Oh, this is Ruby. Where'd you favor riding, pal? Not on my shoe again, huh? My shoulder? Nah, a bit slippery. Hey, I know a nice safe place. And before